Welcome to the Regenerative Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Jody and Crystal Manuel and Brei Larmoyeux, who are the co-founders of Gruff. Gruff is supporting regenerative agriculture with its regenerative organic certified ancient grain grits. Gruff's grits are made from organic cracked farro and are table ready in just 12 minutes. In this episode, we learn about Jody and Crystal's journey transitioning their farm from conventional to organic, plus all the spectacular nuance of how they're currently weaving annuals, perennials, and animals to create a winning regenerative organic system. Crystal shares the story of how feeding their many children a nutritious breakfast inspired the creation of Gruff, and we have Brei and Kyle sidebarring on how we can bring these nutritious grits to bodybuilding bros and other performance athletes across the world. Gruff is a vertically integrated, farmer-led regenerative brand with a great story and a ton of growth potential. Super fun to dive into all of this with Jody, Crystal, and Brei. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Very excited today to have our friends Jody, Crystal, and Brei from Gruff joining us. So welcome, y'all.
Thank you.
We're super pumped. Anthony knows I'm especially pumped. As somebody who eats savory oats every single morning, I was doing a little bit of brand research, and I was like, man, I'd love to have some savory Gruff to change it up a little bit. So I'm really excited. But give us a quick lay of the land. For those who are unfamiliar with the brand Gruff, what sort of SKUs do you produce? Where can people find your products today?
So right now, you can find us online. We have an ancient grain grit. We have one SKU right now. So that SKU is Farro. We've cracked down the ancient grain Farro. There is plans to expand, but right now that's the one that we have. You can find us online. You can find us in Azure Standard. We're distributed all over Montana with small distributors, Cisco, Quality Foods, and Western Montana Growers Co-op. Nice. We're in two colleges. We're in the two colleges in Montana. So we're pretty excited about the growth happening.
Amazon, right?
Amazon. We're also on Amazon.
Excellent. And just the website is gruffgrains.com for anybody interested. And we'll reiterate that later in the episode, but just want to ensure everybody has the option to go find the product if they're looking for it.
Yeah, it's a good segue into the origin story, because there's some really cool copy on the website about, obviously, the background here with Jody and Crystal and the farm where all this stuff is happening and sourced from. And, it's a really cool story in so many ways. And tell us how it all got started, Jody and Crystal.
We would probably have different versions of that story, but
I'll correct him when he goes wrong.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Far off track.
Well, so for me, I'll do my best to do a very nutshell version of something that goes way back, because we've just literally been here on my family's farm and ranch, from the beginning, and since I would say the time of our conversion to organic in 2007. It's been an amazing journey, but this has been with me at the helm of all of that. And, Crystal has just been the supportive wife and all of that. But for so long, she's wanted to do something to take it to the next level. It's just that she was too busy raising children all these years. And so I think we both knew there was going to come a day. And for me, from my perspective, it would just be kind of stepping aside and being in a supportive role of whatever that might look like. And there's been so many possible options over the years of ideas like this that she has explored. But then, the day that stands out in my mind goes back to January of 2014. We're right here in our kitchen, and I got to witness these two meeting each other face to face for the first time. And it became clear, wow, there's major potential here for many cool things to happen. And so that was kind of, I know that goes way back before the official origin story that ties in with COVID and all of that, but that's where it begins for me, where it's never has been my thing. It's been Crystal's thing. But now, seeing the way things have unfolded, it's also occurred to me that one of the biggest challenges for farm families is transitioning the farm to the next generation. And all of a sudden it's like, well, what a perfect way for us to have another direction to go to build something new and different and exciting, and at the same time step aside and hand the reins over to the next generation. So that's kind of how I'm viewing this at this point.
Wow. Well, set the stage for us, y'all, a little bit on what has happened on the farm in the last 10 years. You know, what do you grow? Just set the scene maybe for folks on what the operation has looked like.
Well, the farm has transitioned from a conventional farm prior to 2007 to certified organic. And the reason for that was because some years back, I ended up getting pretty sick fairly quickly, so it seemed. And so we learned a lot about that process because I had been diagnosed with Graves' disease. But by the time they figured out exactly what it was, the symptoms were in pretty full swing and fairly severe. And so I really wanted to know why I had an autoimmune disease as opposed to just being treated for it conventionally through Western medicine, because they weren't really looking at the why. They were just looking at a thyroid removal. And that didn't really resonate with me because I just kind of needed to know. So that's where we deep dove into the study of like what causes an autoimmune disease. And it was interesting. That was literally the first thing that I ever Googled, like ever.
Wow.
That kind of shaped us.
Amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And we had babies at the time. So I was like Googling late at night, and you would like type in something and then have to wait like forever in a day to get your answer back.
Yeah.
But I just, it was amazing because even way back then, it was all pointing toward chemicals, which we knew that there was a lot of. Now, I will never say that that was the only reason why I ended up sick. We'll never really know the answer to that story. Yeah. But I do know that I had a lot of exposure to that kind of thing. And at the time, we weren't even the ones farming here, but we're just in a community where there's a lot of conventional farming. And so that kind of, it's like, once we started down that path, it's like the more that you learn, the more that you want to know, and then you just can't not know it, right? So for us, it meant we either had to make a conversion or just not farm and ranch here anymore, because there was just no way to continue going forward the way that it was. And so we began our journey there. The very first thing we did was go to a MOA convention, a Montana Organic Association event, where we just met an incredible amount of people that are still so supportive and great mentors to us today. Nice. People like David Oyen of Timeless Foods. Jody began growing lentils for him. Bob Quinn of Kamut International. These and so many more. There's just so many incredible people there doing every kind of spectrum of farming, from gardening to orchards to dry land and everything in between. So anyway, that's kind of how we got our start. We kind of jumped in. We got our first certification going in 2007, and then and that's basically the beginning of the organic journey. But it has led us to where we are today. And, so many lessons learned, and every year is different, and has been over the course of the journey. But at one point along the way, Brei and her family moved to Montana, and they worked with us. So she lived here for a period of time. And that's where we really kind of discovered the joy of food and families, and really got to kind of explore that, because collectively between our families, we have 11 children. So
wow.
Farm labor.
Lots of people to eat.
They're getting, the labor force, especially on our end. We're really blessed to have the help that we have. Our kids do a good job, and some of them are here and working pretty much full time and on a regular basis. But
super appreciate you sharing that. AC and I both come from places with some health issues in our past as well. And it's been one of those recurring themes on the podcast of how many people who are like deep into this regenerative movement come from this place of like, why am I sick? This doesn't seem to make sense. So that really resonated with me, and I'm sure AC as well. I'm curious to get a better sense of like, you mentioned the farm was conventional before this transition. What were you growing then? What are you growing now? And most specifically, like, why Farro? And let's talk into a little bit about like the Farro development and why you chose that specific grain.
Okay. Nutshell again. That's a long span. So back when this health crisis took place for Crystal, show them your neck, by the way. Like, there should be a scar here for a removed thyroid, and there's no scar. Every doctor was telling her, this is what you have to do. You'll have to have your thyroid removed, and you'll have to be on a medication the rest of your life. And she sought different answers and found those answers, and it was very eye-opening for me. I was very bah humbug, probably like most every other person in agriculture in this area at the time. But at the time for us, we weren't farming. We were just, my father and I were running our cow herd together. We had farm land that we leased out to another family member. But anyways, this is what kind of started things ticking for us. And after spending time with these people that we met at Montana Organic Association, we decided to just jump back into farming, and caused years-long family rift that was very much a struggle for a very long time. But anyways, so Emmer, I was introduced to Emmer through Timeless Seeds that's been mentioned. David Oyen, he's a giant in the organic industry. Yeah. I mean, books have been written about him and his story, and but that was my introduction to Emmer, to Ancient Grains.
Jody, is Emmer a different word for Farro?
Yes.
Okay.
For some reason, when it's growing, when we plant it and it's growing in the field, it's called Emmer, but when you see it on the store shelf, it's Farro.
Yeah.
It's as you, I'm sure, are familiar, it's very similar to spelt. It's just that spelt gets planted in the fall, Emmer gets planted in the spring. The plants themselves look quite different, but the end product is almost indistinguishable as far as from a visual standpoint. They do cook differently, but I've always found it's a very easy crop to grow. It's great in our rotations, and honestly, it's where these two landed on over the years. There's been so many things. It could have been a granola company. It could have been marketing our beef, which is still something on the horizon, maybe for the next generation. But that's where they landed during this COVID time when Brei wound up back up here with all of her kids, and it was like we were all stranded here, and they had all these kids to feed every day, and that was how they. A big part of how they did it. 30 chickens outside that there was 2 dozen eggs every day that were getting consumed.
Except when Atticus broke them.
I know, when my son would he would throw them against the wall.
Okay.
The little guy what was he, like 3 then?
He was tiny.
Anyway, we would send him out to gather the eggs, but he would come in with none.
Literally egg on his face.
So it sounds like we need to go to Brei to wrap the origin story. But before we do, Jody, I would like you to touch on kind of the ancient grains, more diverse grains information, like a little bit more in depth, because I do think even a lot of our listeners don't even know about that. Like, we live in a world where the vast majority of grain rotations in this country is corn, soy, wheat, maybe some oats. And, like Kyle has already said, like, he eats oatmeal every day, and there's not a lot of choices beyond that. So can you just talk about, like, from a farmer perspective, what was that journey like, really diversifying into these lesser known crops or crops that might not have as much of a market, and how has like that been commercially in terms of what the market was to produce those?
Yeah. So from my perspective on that, probably starting with spelt, there's another company up here in Montana called Montana Milling, that there was really, there still is to this day, a nice market for spelt. I had never heard of spelt before, but I found out where to source the seed and I planted it. And
Yeah.
what I remember, it's this beautiful, you plant it in the fall, and if you get a decent year, it grows nice and tall. It's easy threshing, easy to harvest, and looks very different. Of course, where we are here in the Golden Triangle, we grow wheat. Every farmer here, we grow wheat. So once in a while, maybe somebody might throw barley in there. We grow winter wheat and spring wheat, and that's what we grow. And I literally remember my dad, who I'd been, we'd been locking horns over all of this, but I remember him riding on the combine with me, combining spelt, and I lost track of the number of times he would turn to me and he'd say, "Now, what do you call this stuff again?" And how much is it worth again? And I would tell him, he would just kind of shake his head. And so anyways, it was introducing something that wasn't even that big of a stretch. It's another small grain. We're used to planting those. We're used to growing them, but it's just, it was just something different for the rotation. I think from a nutrient standpoint, though, that's a whole nother conversation about the proteins that are different, the glycemic sensitivities that don't seem to be a thing with ancient grains, like you hear about more and more and more. But anyways, that's a nutshell version of my perspective when we first started out on this journey with ancient grains.
So it all started with spelt, and now it's grown into a rotation of what?
Well, okay, so spelt and emmer, these two ancient grains, timeless seeds, their focus is lentils, and so that's always a part of the rotation. And they're fantastic because they're a legume, and so with the protein that they bring from the air, but also they've expanded into chickpeas. Those crops, great in a rotation, but they're much more difficult to grow and harvest. They don't suppress weeds because they're so short. So they come with their own set of challenges at the same time. But another it's not really an ancient grain, but there's a variety of purple barley that we've grown for them. We grow rye, of course, barley, oats, all of the small grains.
Wow.
Plus those legumes. However, currently the biggest thing that's happening on the farm here with our cropland is that we're converting it all into perennials with a focus on kernza. Actually, kernza interseeded with alfalfa. So we have a grass and a legume growing together. We can graze it, we can hay it, we can harvest the kernza. That's a journey we began in 2020, and so it's still unfolding. So in that, we're trying to get away from tillage as much as we can. So now we'll be able to go a span of years without tilling the ground and letting the mycorrhiza fungi and everything, being able to leave it alone. But even in that, we'll still be rotating those perennials out. And so on a much smaller scale, we will have some acres to grow these annuals, the emmer and the spelt and the lentils and the chickpeas and all of that.
That's fascinating.
But our operation, it probably should be noted, 2/3 of our acres are just native grass, and that we graze. Wow. So it's the other third that's the cropland that's surrounded by native grass. So it all works within our grazing system.
Amazing. Well. Did you ever graze over the row cropping or the grain cropping area?
Yes. Our cattle are steeply integrated with our cropping system.
Amazing. We can get more into the agronomy in a moment. I do want to pivot to why cracked Farro grits. I want to get to that point in this story. So I think Brei's nodding her head like she's ready to go there. So take us there. Why, you're growing all these amazing crops. You decided to start a brand. Why start a brand and why that specific crop?
Brei's son's throwing eggs everywhere, but you still trust her enough to do business with her.
Right.
What was going on there?
Right. Well, with Farro, it was we actually didn't start with the idea of Farro. We actually thought we were putting spelt in a box. And so they called me. We've got the box design ready. The name is on there. I've ordered the barcode, everything's ready to go. And they're like, actually, what about Farro? And I'm like, what? I'm literally about to send this to print like 5,000 boxes. Like, you want to do Farro now? And so then I get on Moz so I start doing Google search, not Google search, Moz searches of like marketing. It's a marketing website where you can look up what's more popular, right? Like who is searching for Farro, who is searching for spelt. So it turned out that more people were searching for Farro. So I was like, okay, like we can do this. So originally it was going to be spelt. We had more, I believe the issue was there was more Farro in the bin. Is that correct at the time? So we decided to make that flip flop.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, like the actual idea for doing the Farro in a grit form really just came about from feeding 11 children and that's what we had a lot of here. You know, there's like not a lot of time to food prep, but grains we always get back from the places that we sell to our grains cleaned and ready to go, but they're always in whole berry form. And I have a large grinder that sits on our counter. You can see a picture of it, I think, on the website. But we discovered that you could feed children who were a little fussy ancient grains if you ground them up a bit because the texture is better. And as an added bonus as moms, it cooks in 12 minutes instead of 45, you know, so that was a huge bonus, but they ate it. And they, some of them were on the fussier side and even they really liked it. And we always started out as a hot cereal where we would serve it sweet, usually with raspberries and maple and whatnot. But we soon learned that it was very, very delicious, savory. And now we got two more meals out of the deal because we got now do breakfast and lunch without sweetening it up all day. So anyway, that was how the grit kind of came about. But yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question that's going to feel really rudimentary for you farmers, but as somebody who doesn't spend a lot of time on a farm, like, so you harvest the grain and then like it's hard and then like you actually have to crack it with this device you have on your counter. Walk me through that because as somebody who just buys a bag of oats at the store, I don't really understand how that works and why those processes need to be there.
Yeah. So not only, but long before it gets cracked, when we harvest either spelt or emmer, it's inside of a very thick hull. And there's usually 2 kernels inside of a hull. So it has to first be dehulled. There's some losses there. If you're lucky, you'll get 60% of your weight back from that. And then it gets cleaned and cracked. And that's really it. You know, but you're mentioning oats, though. That's a whole nother animal altogether. Since we've delved into the retail end of the world, I'm learning things that I didn't even know. But with oats, of course, it also has to be dehulled. It's a much smaller kernel. And something I've learned in this process is that when oats is dehulled, there's a certain enzyme inside that hull that will cause the seed to go rancid. So they have to heat it to take out that enzyme. And then they can either make it into groats or roll it into flakes. So like we would love, you know, we have another endeavor of this company, Cream of the West, and we have products that use oats. We would love to be able to use our own oats or reach out to other Montana farmers. The problem is we don't have any of that processing in the whole state of Montana. It all comes out of Canada.
Wow.
You know, so we can buy organic oats, but it's likely going to come out of Canada. And it's just because of those processing challenges.
Wow.
Crazy.
And that's just because like that manufacturing has moved elsewhere and it's just too capital intensive to get stood back up. And
or it's never really even been here. I mean, if there's any remnant left of the Wild West, we probably have it here in Montana. There's a lot of wide open space and not a lot of support for those type of things, I suppose. But
Before we pivot a little more into the agronomy, because I think there's more to talk about there, Crystal, I know this is your jam. Just like, can you talk about the nutrition a little bit, and can you talk about actually what it looks like to make this? You were just going there a second ago, because it's not like this needs a ton of consumer education to know how to use this product, but it's not like reading ice cream here, right? So do you bring it to a boil like it's rice or oatmeal, and then you let it sit? Like, just talk us through, production at the home and like the nutrition profile.
Sure. Well, Brei mentioned earlier that we have one SKU, which is a little bit of a challenge when you're trying to come to market. But the thing about our SKU is it does a lot of things. I mean, we're breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We cook in 12 minutes, so we have the quick base covered, especially for a whole food. And it's really easy. I mean, if you can boil water, you can make our grits. So
seriously,
Fair.
I think I could do that. I think I could handle that.
Yeah. So, but one of the funnest things about it, besides the fact that it goes really nice, sweet and savory, is that you can play with the texture, which if you think about it, you can't really do that well with most other things that you cook. I mean, you cook it too long, you ruined it, or it gets mushy, or, it does weird things. Our grits are cool like that because they can either handle the water or you can back it off depending upon the texture that you want to use. So think everything from rice to risotto in texture, but with an ancient grain grit that's superior in quality, way higher in protein, far easier to digest than any other, kind of grain. Or conventional grains, at least, that we're used to. And it's a whole grain. No enriching needing to happen here because it's the whole cracked kernel. So all components of it are still intact when the grits are cooked up. But those are our favorite features: the sweet and savory aspect and the way that we can play with texture.
Yeah, that's amazing. What has it been like on the marketing side? Like, do you find that consumers know what it is? They need to be educated. How has that been like different between e-commerce and retail? I'm kind of pivoting to commercial here, but curious on that front.
Well, I can say that when your best friend is actually from the South and you call her and tell her that this COVID baby food that we created with all these children, and we called it porridge back then,
originally.
And then one day I have this vision, and it's like, but it's sweet and it's savory. So, and it's a cracked grain, which I'm just going to say, education. The word grit, by definition, means coarsely cracked grain. It does not have to mean corn. Southern friend.
Yeah.
This was a conversation we had to have. She wasn't quite sure that we could call this grits because it's, not what she knows.
Yeah.
I think going into the marketing piece, what we've understood is that, okay, when they called me and they said, we're having a text conversation, what if we called it grits? And I was like, I don't know that we can do that, guys. I don't think you understand what the cultural context is in the South. So there is a very big difference between the cultural context of grits here and in North, because in the North, you just don't, it's not a thing. It's like, there might be cream of wheat, right? Or variations of that. But in the South, grits are corn. Yeah. And if I were to say, no, it's not, then it's like I can see the conversations I have with my family, right? Like because of the culture that it is right here. But what I've come to find is that actually went back to Moz and looked at what are people Google searching right now? Are there more searches on porridge grits or porridge? And it was grits. So it's like, this is what makes us, what do we call it? Defensively unique. Jody, is that the word that we use? Because it's just the truth. You can make it out of anything. And the marketing piece that you were alluding to earlier has been, we call it not your granny's grits. Because that's one of the marketing campaigns that we have. Because of the sustainability aspect of it is so very different and defensively unique as compared to conventional corn that people understand it to be here. But there's quite a bit of education aspect of it. I don't feel like people immediately pick it up and they're like, oh, we know what to do with this, until we say it's like the consistency of couscous or rice. And then that starts the wheels turning. And as Crystal was alluding to earlier, we can use this for any meal of the day. And we don't call it, on our website, we have a concept called now and later meals to break down that concept. That is not leftovers. Like, you make more on purpose, so it can be used throughout the day for different things. So we have that. I believe that's a blog post on our website, the now and later meals. Yeah. Education is a huge part, especially with the sustainability efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's enough regenerative brands out there who struggle alone with the regenerative sustainability messaging. In addition to the fact that you all are fighting the, I don't want to call it the additional uphill battle, but the relatively unique product that you have. So it's like a double education front that you have to fight, which kudos to you all for doing that. And I really think, I love this product already. I haven't tried it yet and I can't wait to. But it really aligns with, like, I try to get, I do a workout in the morning. I need some protein and carbs. So I'll make a bone broth savory oatmeal. Now I'll be making a bone broth savory farro for breakfast. And that satisfies my nutritional needs for, the first half of the day, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I agree. That's my favorite way to eat it. Sorry, Anthony.
You're good, Jody. I agree, Kyle. And we've also seen with a lot of the other brands we've talked to that they need to go to a known form factor to make a market for a new ingredient or a new crop that the farmer needs to grow. And that's why I feel like is the cool opportunity here. And we know that can work. So yeah, go ahead, Jody.
No, I was just chiming in that having this like in a really good beef broth is fantastic.
Do you throw a little cheese on there too? I do some cheese and then pluck seasoning, which is like an organ meat based seasoning. So it's like a true nutritional powerhouse.
I suspect you might be leaving your oatmeal behind.
I'm excited. I can't wait.
That was actually our most recent review. It was on the Azure Standard website. And if you look up our grits on Azure Standard, you can see it. But there was somebody that wrote in that said that oats were, I don't remember quite how she worded it, but they were replacing oats in her home from here on out is how she kind of worded it. But yeah, super fun. We love cooking them in broth. They take on a savory flavor really nicely cooked in any kind of broth, beef, chicken, bone, vegetable. But we also play around with them with herbal teas and such, which is a fun thing to know about. So we steep them, we'll cook them in green tea or jasmine tea. You can kind of get like an Asian flair thing going on.
A bunch of weird hippies.
That's awesome.
We just start opening jars and making infusions. But really fun to play around with other kinds of herbal teas. We've had people steep them in herbal teas and let us know what kind of like cool porridge, breakfast concepts they were coming up. But it's a gourmet ingredient. For one ingredient in a box, you can do all kinds of crazy with it. It's as simple as you need it to be. Even just butter is fine, or it's as artisan as you would like it to be.
I like to call it uncomplicated artisan food. And Kyle, I'm really glad that you said something about adding it to your routine as an athlete or as someone who lifts, or I'm not sure what your exercise routine is, because I strongly feel like
burpees,
we have messaging.
Just burpees.
Burpees.
This man's just been doing burpees lately, so
go you, first of all.
There's nothing real easy about a lot of burpees.
Yeah. So there's that. What I like, and I think the messaging for us that we're trying to figure out for athletes specifically is this is a very efficient carb. So you have something like white rice, which my son is on a bodybuilding regimen, and he eats, his mom has an ancient grain company and he's like, white rice. And I'm like, okay, but that's like, right. It's like the insulin spike that does way more than in the body than your body needs it to do. Right. And so what I like about our product is it's very efficient. Our body uses it very efficiently. And I think athletes need to know that.
Totally. And I think, I sell bone broth for a living. That's what I do for Kettle and Fire. And we think that community is relatively underserved. They're looking to constantly tracking their macros. They're very conscious of their carbohydrate, their protein, their fat intake. And to develop a superfood breakfast like this that can meet those strict macro goals, especially for somebody like your son who's trying to bodybuild and is trying to get probably, I don't know how much your son weighs, but probably close to 150 to 200 grams of protein a day with a pretty significant amount of carbohydrates. Like, this is a powerhouse meal. that doesn't require cooking any meat, which you have to do for the other meals in the day. So it's super efficient from both a metabolic perspective and a time perspective in the kitchen. So I'm already on board. Clearly, I really want to try this stuff. But yeah, totally.
We are multi-dimensional. This is now a fitness influencer podcast.
Right? Well, I feel like that is a very good point, because there is a place where whole food nutrition needs to meet the people who do bodybuilding, because the more that I'm in this space, the more that I realize people are eating a bunch of crap. And what's happening is they're getting like body results, but then they're having other types of symptoms, like they're tearing up their gut because they're not building, they're not supporting what's in there. And so you develop eczema, right? You develop insulin resistance. There are things that come along with the results that you're not necessarily hoping for, because you're not supporting what's inside.
Right. We're going to go way down this rabbit hole because we're here already, so might as well.
Yeah.
Organic Valley, the dairy company, I think in like 2012-ish, launched a campaign called Save the Bros. And it was all about these like super fit guys and how they're consuming bad dairy products and these supplements that are really bad for them. So they're like, give them like, save the bros. Like they're so strong, or whatever the campaign was. It was hilarious.
Dude,
but exactly
awesome.
what you're talking about, like meet people where they are, give them that whole food alternative that can still satisfy their macro goals, but can also take care of like their whole body and not just like make them look jacked.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Because the point is, sorry,
we're going to say the same thing. Go ahead.
Well, the point is, right, it's like, and I as a mother with a son who is actively doing this, and I'm watching this process for him, and it's like, you know what, you have to, these might be the results that you get with X, Y, and Z supplement, but what else is your body telling you? Like, you are so sluggish. Like, you're telling me that you feel awful and that you're sluggish, right? What are you doing to the filtering mechanisms within your body, right? Like your liver, like your kidneys, because of how much you're trying to consume, and the fact that our body doesn't even recognize it as nutrition. So and then not to mention, right, the long-term effects that we see of people in their 40s and their 50s who are just their inflammation in their body, they're done, right? And so they have some sort of metabolic issues, like long-term.
Right.
That's a soapbox of mine. I'm sorry. I don't want to overtake that. That's a soapbox of mine.
But yeah, I will share that soapbox with you, and we can join on that
Take
soapbox.
on the world.
I also want to bring it back to, not only is it better for all those reasons, but then you're also growing a crop that is from more nutrient dense soil, that is improving water infiltration rates, that is mitigating climate change, and doing so much great stuff for the planet. So like this feels like a good opportunity to kind of pivot back towards the agronomy. And I'm curious, Jody, to get a sense of like what changed on your farm that you noticed. And I don't know how much like soil testing you were measuring, or if you were doing water infiltration rate tests or biodiversity, observations, but what changed on the farm, like with your own eyes, as you started to make these transitions towards regenerative?
Great question. And the quickest way to talk about that is to say that it's continually unfolding. One of the things that it's always been frustrating every year, because we've never been able to do the amount of sampling that we would like to, because we're always so busy from about 15 days from now until October 1st, we're just slammed. And but in the last couple of years, I will say this: we've been working with Mad Ag, that I know you guys are familiar with, and they've been doing some. I mean, you can't even believe the things they've literally sent teams out here to do all of these tests: the soil samples, the Haney test, water infiltration, insect counts, bird counts. There's this really cool project in the works that involves a local beekeeper that keeps hives on our place, where they literally have these special entrances that screw onto one of the hives that collects the bee pollen, and they're now taking that bee pollen, sending it to this lab over in Europe, and they're analyzing it for that. We know now every single plant that pollen is being collected from, as well as
amazing.
They're testing for ag chemicals, residue, and heavy metals, and
And we do those tests were performed multiple times on a very cyclical, regimented basis last summer for the first time. So we're about to get on a call pretty soon to collect all the information from those results, but literally looking at the DNA of the things growing here, not just in 1 week, but in multiple weeks. And what we're finding, because they've been sending bits of results along the way. And what's really fascinating about those results that we're really excited about is the variance that they're finding from, a few weeks apart. And it's an opportunity to look at a regenerative program above ground, because we've put a lot of attention and toward the things that are happening under the ground. But really a regenerative is a full spectrum system. It's, we're looking at everything. And so this was a really unique opportunity via them to look at above ground
also
occurrences.
Part of that project, some oats that we're growing for Purely Elizabeth, and that was a contract that was also arranged through MAD. They're doing nutrient testing on that crop that will be linked to this beekeeper project. So that's all of this. There's major things to unfold. It's all going to take some time. But in the meantime, in answer to your question, like just what things can you observe? From a very non-scientific perspective, it's plain as day on the fields that we planted to Kernza 4 years ago now. I do have pictures and video from last spring, but I went out to walk across those fields, and we are in an area where we have very heavy clay soil, and the more you till that soil, the denser and harder it gets, and it just gets to where it's like concrete. And now you're having to till more, which is compounding the problem. And so, anyways, these fields that we've now put into perennials and we've just left them alone, after 3 years, you can walk across the top and you can just feel that top 2 inches is like a sponge because of the microbial activity that's now built up that soil. And so I want to get that 2 inches down to 6 or 8 or 10 inches. So anyways, lots unfolding.
Yeah, Jody, there's a really unique piece there that I'd like you to chat about, which I don't think we've really covered on the show yet, which is, obviously commodity grain rotations are pretty tough, right? A typical, very conventional monocrop approach, it's not great for everybody. Yeah. Then we have kind of a step up from that, which is usually like an organic, more diverse rotation. Y'all are going beyond that with perennials and the animal integration piece, which I do think is very unique. And my assumption is it's extremely complex and challenging. So I would love for you to talk about kind of the perennial integration and the animal integration, and just like, how has all that unfolded? What's been challenging? What's worked? Why is it so important? Because that seems to be like such a thing that we still don't know how to really move the needle on with a bunch of farmers yet.
Okay. Tell me again the specific question.
Yeah, like how has it been to do the perennial and the animal integration, right? Because I feel like we're doing a decent job with these diverse organic grain rotations.
It's been exciting. You can you can walk out onto the fields in about 3 months, and you can, like I remember doing this last year. Everywhere there's a cow pie on a Kernza field, ground is still really cold, right? So the dung beetles haven't come out, the earthworms haven't come out yet, but you can, anywhere you can find a nice big cow pie that's intact enough, and you flip it over and there's earthworms right there. It's like their own private little greenhouse that they come up to the surface, and there's bone castings in there. In the last couple of days, I just had an urge to do something that I would love to have more time to do. But I put together a reel and it was done super quickly, and there's lots of things that need to be tweaked and honed on it. But it's like, okay, social media, you have to appeal to that 60-second goldfish brain, but you have to tell this huge story. But anyways, if you go to our Prairie Grass Ranch, it's not on any Gruff sites yet, but Prairie Grass Ranch Facebook page, you can watch this 1.5 minute long reel that kind of it details this whole process. And didn't get into kerns in it, but there is alfalfa, and we're doing the same types of things with alfalfa, and actually eventually everything will be alfalfa and kerns together.
But to do what we do and how we do it, one of the biggest challenges is looking at things through a different lens and having a fresh perspective on things that oftentimes farmers look as problematic. One of those things, and a challenge for every single organic and thereby regenerative farmer that I think that we've ever met is weeds. Because that's the reason why chemicals are largely being used. They're suppressing weeds so that they can increase yields, because without weed competition, ideally the thought process would be that the yields would be higher. But from our perspective, because we have to contend with weeds in a different way, we've also learned to look at them differently. And we look at them as just visual clues. Certain weeds grow in certain areas for specific reasons, and it really all comes down to they're just telling us what's happening underneath the ground, so that we can determine what to plant in order to help get help settle out the soil ratios, whatever the issue is.
That's fascinating. I want to just kind of like double click on that a little bit. So essentially, if I'm reading between the lines correctly, like if there's a particular weed, and I know nothing about farming, but let's call it dandelion is growing, and maybe that indicates like this is particularly phosphorus rich soil, which is probably totally wrong. But you're saying that like the weed is indicating what's happening underground, so you can make the adjustments above ground to try to fix that soil. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So here would be an example. One of our biggest, maybe the biggest problem weed that we have in this area is Canada thistle. It's a perennial, and like it's clear, it's crystal clear when you're fighting it the way that we've been fighting it. You can see the places it likes to grow. Well, we have all this heavy clay soil here, and what I've noticed with Canada thistle is the heavier the clay, the low spots with very wet, tight, almost anaerobic soil, that's where that weed likes to grow. And the more that you till and the harder your soil becomes, the more that this weed moves in. Well, it's this perennial with this really long, deep taproot that goes 4, 5, 6 feet down. And it's almost like it's doing something to aerate this anaerobic soil. And it's problematic. It's this fierce battle, but the best way to combat it is with perennials, in particular alfalfa. But one of the things that I've noticed on some of these fields where we've fought it the longest is that all of a sudden, like this wheat, it starts out growing in patches, and the patches will get bigger and bigger every year, and pretty soon the patches are overlapping, and then pretty soon it's just solid.
Wow.
It's continuous. But I've seen it get to the point where all of a sudden, almost like that, it's like, where did all the Canada thistle go? It's like gone. It's like it worked itself out of a job. You might see an occasional plant here and there, but the patches are gone. And I think, I mean, there's a book that's been written about this. I can't think of the name of the authors, but it's called Weeds and Why They Grow. And it's more like a reference manual. You can look up what types of weeds you have growing, and then they'll tell you what's happening in your soil and what it's lacking. And it's almost like, I've come to see, it's like plant communities are like human communities, and it's like they come into areas that are conducive to what they like and what they need, but then as they grow, they're consuming what's there, and they're leaving something different behind, and it eventually reaches a point where it's no longer conducive for that plant to grow, but something else. And I guess plant progression, that's the other thing. You can I've seen patches that my dad broke out of native sod, and then plans changed or whatever. And I remember this one particular little 5 acre or so patch, and it just turned into this huge weed patch in the middle of a pasture, and kind of got forgotten about. And you'd pass by it in your day to day, but 10 years later, you could not tell that patch from the rest of the native prairie around it because that progression took place from weeds to this native pasture, which native pasture is like a picture of perfect balance. It's like this huge variety of plants growing together, and you'll never see a weed take hold anywhere in our native pasture because it's like, sorry, we're fully booked here.
Right. Yeah, we have a fully functioning ecosystem, and we don't need disruption, or they don't have to tolerate disruption like a poor ecosystem would maybe benefit from some of these weeds you're talking about for whatever period of time until it gets to the point where that native grass or whatever crop you're putting in there is going to work well.
Right. So we're trying to on our crop fields, we're trying to get to that point while still raising a cash crop that can support a farm.
Jody mentioned the Canadian thistle and the taproot of that and how deep it goes, and it's one of our favorite characteristics of the Kernza that's growing. It has a very long root. In fact, Patagonia's we have a contract with them currently for some of it, and they're putting it into a regenerative organic microbrew called Long Root Ale for that very reason. But the reason that is so cool, and what we've learned is in the same way that the Canadian thistle taproots tell us, they go deep because they're mining for nutrients that are not available at the surface level, which is where the root structures are for the grain products that we grow. And so Kernza's taproots go deep, and they mine those same kinds of nutrients up. And we're really excited to begin including that into our grits for that reason, because one of the things that we like to talk about is nutrient density and the fact that food will only ever be as nutrient rich as the soil in which it's grown. So you can have foods that look the same. You can have two carrots that look exactly the same, more or less, but if you look at the nutrient profile of them, depending upon the soil they come from, they're actually going to be very different. And so we're pretty excited to have some of these tests continue to unfold to hopefully prove the point that we believe to be true.
Absolutely. And there's a fantastic book I read. It's called The Dorito Effect. I don't know if you all have heard of it or not.
This guy should be paying this man. This guy needs to pay this man.
It's a phenomenal book. It's a phenomenal read. It's very entertaining. I listened to the audiobook, but he talks a lot about what you're talking about with this nutrient density piece. And when you think about how farmers are paid, what are they incentivized to do? And it's about yield and weight, right? It's not about nutritional density. And the way we have hybridized and genetically modified the majority of our crops is to get as big as possible, as fast as possible. And especially like they talk a lot about tomatoes. So the tomatoes are essentially just filled with water because it is heavy. So farmers get paid for this like flavorless, nutritionless tomato that is big and red and it looks nice, you know? And I really hope that the regenerative movement can link up with this nutritional density piece, and we can start to re-educate consumers about the importance of nutritional density. And size and looks like aren't everything. And it's really about the quality of what's in the food. And there's supposedly this new technology coming about where there's like this magic wand that you will be able to wave over like an apple, and it will be able to tell you the nutritional density, which I'm just really excited for the future. And I'm pumped that you guys are as tuned into this as you are. And I don't think we've ever gotten this like literally deep into the weeds talking about pulling up deep nutrients out of the soil. So I'm just really excited to be talking about this on the podcast. And thank you for sharing.
It's funny you mentioned the tomatoes full of water, and it reminds me, my grandfather had two places where he summered his cattle, and he would split his herd every spring, and he had a lease on some ground that was a couple hundred miles west of where we are, right over next to Glacier Park, lush, beautiful, tall green grass. He would take half of his herd there. The other half he would take straight out north of us here towards the Canadian border, like a desert. It was just, you'd go out there and there was more dirt blowing around and clumps of grass. And anyways, he'd bring all of his cattle back to their ranch in the fall and wean the calves and weigh them all. And every single year, the calves that came off the cows that were up on the deserty, dry, nothing, like they always outweighed the calves that were summered on the term we use is washy grass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a nutrient density, but kind of, because it's a high water content on that type of grazing.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah, makes sense.
continually add fertilizers to the ground year after year at the ratios that people use, and this includes even in a garden, miracle grow, things like that. I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, but what's been explained to us is that really what ends up happening is the plant is no longer able to uptake the micronutrients and the minerals that it needs to actually be nutrient dense. It can get really big. I mean, that's what it can be, big and beautiful and very void of nutrition. The nutrition quality can be very low. It's just the way that it works within the plant.
And that makes me want to circle back to a better rounded out question of what I said earlier, Jody, of like, it sounds like y'all were able to work on the animal integration piece a little bit easier because you were already running cattle as another business. So how do we do that for more farmers? Like, how do we get more crop farmers to do animal integration? Like, what's the unlock there?
So there's our friends and colleagues at Villicus that they have an amazing organic farm north of us, up near the Canadian border, out in that region I was just talking about. And you know, we're here next to this small mountain range, so we're mostly pasture. Our fences are already in place. We got good water, good springs, but you go that direction. There used to be fences long ago. Like this animal integration was just a natural thing for our grandparents, but now all the fences have been taken out. The crop fields are bumper to bumper. And of course, they're in this new kind of paradigm and new system where they're wanting to get into this. And so we've actually been taking our yearlings out there the last few summers, which has really helped take the pressure off at our own operation. Yeah. They're planting just a whole myriad of cover crops, but so far they're having to do it with electric fencing. But the biggest challenge is water. Because it's so dry out there, and there's an occasional reservoir here and there, but a lot of times they have semi tankers that they fill with water every day, and then have to haul it out, and it's this huge pain. So that doesn't really help answer your question, but I would just say that every operation is going to be different, and every operation is going to have its own challenges. We went to a convention in Nebraska called the Grass-Fed Exchange a few years ago, and that's where I was first introduced to the concept of mob grazing.
Yeah.
But what they have there that we don't, and we're blessed with the water that we have on our place, but down there, no matter where you're at, you can drill a well anywhere, and 50 feet down, you hit hundreds of gallons a minute. So they have wells everywhere. They can run lines on top of the ground because they don't have to worry about freezing like we do, and they can move these cattle. This one place we were on, they were moving. They had like 750 head of Highlander cattle on like 2 acres at a time, and they were moving them eight times a day.
Wow! Jeez, holy cow!
But as they moved them, they had a water trough on skids that they pulled with a 4-wheeler, and it was attached to this water line, and they could just turn the water on and have so much flow. It was really fantastic to get to see all that, but none of that would work here. Our country is far too rugged. We have put in a lot of cross fencing, a lot to bring our pasture size down to a couple hundred acres instead of 1,000 acres. But our water, as good as it is here, is limited. It's only in certain locations. A few years ago, we took part in an EQIP contract to the NRCS, which enabled us to put in 4 miles of pipeline, drill a well, put in 10 stock tanks, and we got the water up high on the ridges instead of just down in the bottoms like it was. And that was a really fantastic thing. So there are programs in place like that could really help producers through the NRCS. There's one of them is EQIP, and the other one is CSP. In fact, I was just visiting with those guys yesterday, and about some of this perennial planting. That's also part of their programs. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I heard context, I heard collaboration, and I heard certain financial mechanisms to support the actual change implementation. So I think you answered it very well.
Yeah, I'll add infrastructure, which sort of addresses all three of those. And really, like, I know that there's so many people looking to invest in the regenerative space right now, and so many brands looking to get into it, and there's grant dollars available out there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really enjoyed about that explanation, Jody, was like, it makes it feel possible as long as we can build that infrastructure to support those systems, right? And that doesn't strike me as easy. It doesn't strike me as non-capital intensive, but it does give like a legitimate solution. And if we can get legislators to incentivize that type of transition over monoculture corn across half the arable land in this country, like, think about the impact that could make. You know, it's crazy to think about how great that could be for the planet, the ecosystem, human nutritional density, you know, lack of money spent on healthcare. So it gets me really excited.
Okay, so I just thought of something that on this topic, it could revolutionize everything. It's something I just found out more about it at Montana Organic Associates Convention in December, but there's a couple different companies doing it now. One of them is called a No Fence. It's pretty expensive at this point in time, but if there was ever grants, are you guys familiar with this, where you put collars on the cattle, and from your phone you can draw your boundaries? And so the gentleman that was presenting this told a story about, he was over in Australia. He had these cattle that he was grazing on a neighbor's cornfield, and there was another producer who had cattle on a cornfield right next door, and of course his cattle had these collars on, but his neighbors didn't. So they had a one-wire electric fence. And while he was over in Australia, he gets a phone call in the middle of the night because this neighbor's cattle had broke through the electric fence, and they were all mixed up with his cattle on this other producer's ground. And so he took his phone and he waited, and you can see where every animal is from your phone, and they were all down at one end of the boundary, and then he just changed the boundary to keep them down on that end. And then, of course, the other producer's cattle just wandered out, and they separated themselves.
Wow.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Work our boys out of a job too.
Yeah.
They wouldn't mind.
They wouldn't.
Yeah, virtual fencing's wild. There's another company called Vents that's had some success in that space as well. I do want to make sure we talk about Gruff commercial stuff a little bit more, if there's anything else we want to touch on there. One question I had from the earlier dialogue was, what's the food service opportunity here? Because y'all are talking about like this amazing capability of the grain to have all these food service, foodie type of concepts. So how do y'all see that as a growth channel, and what's the opportunity there?
I think it's huge. I think
sounds like
it's huge. Yeah. Because of the origin of the journey, or my journey anyways, and learning through overcoming Graves' disease, that food is medicine. And then raising the amount of children that we have, and we collectively just have a passion for helping the general consumer base to understand it. I mean, determining why we wanted to start this company is hard because it's a ton of reasons. I mean, it's really fun to work with people that you love. It's really fun when you have a cool origin story. But if I had to get right down to the reason why, for me, it's just because I care deeply about what people are eating. And we sold grain on contracts for a number of years to really cool companies. And one of the things that broke my heart the most was finding out that most of the stuff was going out to different places, oftentimes European markets or really high-end health food stores and really cool 5-star restaurants oftentimes. And so we kind of decided that one of the cool things that we would like to do is just to make it accessible and available. And in our country, food service is one really cool way to do that.
Yeah.
So we hope that all kinds of consumers find us. But because of the nature of food service and the places that do it, and the amounts of people that are going through those, whether it's at the universities or different schools. There's some restaurants, that we would like to make connections with. But we really do. I mean, it's a fantastic product for food service. The colleges here love it. In Bozeman at Montana State University, they use it as a breakfast porridge. At the University of Montana, they use it savory in a grain bowl bar as the base for their grain bowls. And so we continually end up having these fascinating conversations with people who lend itself to these kinds of things. In fact, this afternoon at 1:00, I'm having a conversation with the Culinary Institute of America to talk to them about that. I recently got to meet Sophie Egan via a call, who has helped me set some of these kinds of things up. And they all have a passion and affinity toward healthy consumer food service ideas. And then Brei, you can speak to a couple of the people that you've helped us to meet recently, because there's been some cool conversations.
Yeah, I think, when you talk about food service is very large. It's a huge market. But when we were talking, we've connected with people like Hillary Boynton of School of Lunch in California. And she's doing this amazing thing where she's bringing in food service directors to teach them how to make traditionally prepared foods. There is a lot of conversation right now around school lunches, school breakfasts. There's an activist, Rob Greenfield, I think is his name, that he is for the next month going to be eating just breakfast and school lunches to see how, this is what we feed our kids.
Wow.
So this should be I know.
It's going to
like
be
a
bad.
supersize me of school food.
It's going to be
That's
Lunchables and Tony's pepperoni pizzas and all kinds of BS.
So I think that the conversation that we would like to start having is, if you have, we know Zen Honeycutt is doing a lot of really good work in introducing moms across America to, that's the name of her brand, to food that has been produced organically and even in the regenerative organic space. And so I want to have these conversations with these people, if the basis, if we depend on nutrition, if we say this in theory, how do we take this to action? How do we take this to the everyday? How do we change the cafeterias in America in the next 10 years? How do we do that? Those are the conversations we want to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And kudos to you all for focusing on that side of food service and the potential unlock that has for kids and the whole generation of people who are kind of confined to having to eat within those channels. It's I hate to use the word confined, but that's really how it feels. I do want to pivot a little bit and talk some more about like the brand side. You've got a killer name, Gruff. The packaging is super clean, feels super authentic. I'm curious, the name Gruff doesn't necessarily lend itself specifically to Farro. So longer term, like, are there any possible, new products coming out? Any new directions you're hoping to go? Like, talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh, we have so many ideas in the vaults. It's crazy. Like, I'm not sure we'll live long enough. We have really cool ideas coming up. The word gruff, since you brought it up, let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Let's do it.
Because you learn things along the way that are interesting. The nutshell version of why we chose that name is because it correlates with the folk tale, the Three Billy Goats Gruff. Are you guys aware? Are you familiar with that story?
No.
I've heard the title before, but I have no idea what the actual story is.
No.
Dang it! Well, yeah, we could talk about this ahead of time. I
knew it.
We should have got a pre-read. Apologies.
Well, here's what happened. I love that story, and I also have pack goats. They're like the one animal that is on the ranch, well, with the exception of the donkey that lives with them, that are just there for pure fun, right?
But we thought it was as familiar to everyone as Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Oh yeah, it was 6 months.
Okay.
We were already called Gruff. I'm laying out the marketing campaign. I got this vision. I'm stoked because it's all about consumer education. It's helping people overcome obstacles. It's helping people understand about regenerative practices. It's helping people understand about whole food nutrition and nutrition density and differences and ancient grains. I'm excited. I'm rolling with Gruff. And then Brei says to me, like, literally, I think we were like 6 months in. Is that right? Like we were.
I like the story, right? But yes, go ahead. I like your version. I like this.
Did I tell you the story for the very first time?
Huh? Did you? Yeah. Yes, that's where I heard it.
See, I didn't know.
I've got a trend. Like, I'm guessing Brei went on Moz and looked up Billy Goat's Gruff and realized not many people were searching Billy Goat's Gruff.
Yeah. Right. She tells me like 6 months in with this whole grandiose like plan in my mind, right? You do realize, he said gently to me one day, not everybody knows this folk tale. I'm like, what? No, I don't know. So this comes up in conversation with our daughter, who puts a deal out on Facebook, a poll out on Facebook. Who knows this story? And we find out there's like some people that don't know this story. Come to find out,
30%.
Yeah, like 30% of the people that answered the poll didn't know. And so I argue those results a little bit though, because my nephew said that it was his favorite story and my brother said he'd never heard of it. And then my nephew's response is, you read it to me. I think there's marginal room for error to slant a little back against what Brei's saying.
So do the two of you know the story?
No. So this is 40% of our current conversation has never heard this story.
We'll pause now for a fast story time.
Yeah, please.
The Three Billy Goats Gruff is a Norwegian folk tale. Dates back, I don't know, at least a couple hundred years, maybe longer. But anyway, it's a story about three brother goats, and their last name is Gruff. And there's a baby one, and a medium-sized one, and a great big one. And the thing is they realize that the food that they're eating is just pretty much subpar, and it's getting pretty slim pickings in the pasture where they are. But they can see across the river that there's these lush, incredible fields full of forage that they're just dying to get over and graze. The problem is they have to cross a bridge, and the bridge is guarded by a hangry, greedy troll. And so
I just have to pause. I'm getting strong Harry Potter vibes right now.
I'm locked in.
I can't remember what the story is, but there's like the three brothers who have to cross the bridge, and death guards the bridge. Like this is like same, which is crazy.
Wow.
Sorry to interrupt. Continue on.
Oh, I'm gonna have to call Jake.
Yeah, please.
When we get off the phone, ask her about this now. So they devise a plan. And basically what they do is they send the little one across the bridge first, and the troll stops him, and he's thinking he's going to eat him. But the little one says, well, if you wait just a little bit longer, there's another one coming across that's a little bigger. And so the greedy troll lets him pass. And then the second troll comes across, or the second goat goes across, and he says basically the same thing. I mean, you could eat me now, but there's one coming across that's so much better, so much bigger. And so the greedy troll lets him go by. And then the big brother goat comes by, and they have this confrontation on the bridge, and the goat knocks the troll off the bridge, and he skips across and meets up with his brothers, and they graze on this incredible food happily ever after. And we kind of look at the troll for our business like the troll is so many things. I mean, the troll is conglomerative in the food world, where we've got chemical companies and pharmaceutical companies, and there's just kind of like this obstacle that keeps people from understanding and knowing better. The marketing that's out there with false food claims and inflated words that don't mean anything, that the general population oftentimes is very confused by and very trusting of when they shouldn't be, but they don't know better. And then there's all kinds of other trolls, like my troll, which was Graves' disease, and changed my life when I got past it. So the troll can really be looked at as like the obstacle that keeps people from making better food choices or doing the better farming practices, or whatever it is. But in a journey, there's oftentimes, no matter who we are, there's oftentimes a troll to conquer. And we can look at him as being a lot of different things, but in our minds, in my mind, and once I shared it with Brei, I think she could understand it a little bit better once I told her the story. But it's just a fun way, we intend on using that storyline and that framework. We have future plans for the educational aspect that we hope to share with the larger consumer audience, everyone from little kids, to adults. And I teach food classes with a good friend of ours locally in Havre. Her husband happens to be a naturopath, and her father is actually Bob Quinn of Kamut International. So she understands food. And we get a lot of people that come in who are really sick wanting to take classes. And they, sometimes they'll go to the doctor and they'll tell them that they need to eat better. But oftentimes, if it's not been your practice and if you don't really understand food, that's a hard thing to accomplish. Right. And so we try to help them in that way tackle that troll, right? Just the simple bit of education that we can share around food oftentimes can lead people on a better journey. It's been our backstory. So it's one of the ways that we like to talk about it.
I love it. I think run with it all the way. Because I actually liked that I didn't know about it and that I got told it, through you, through the brand. So I think there's huge opportunity there. And I think through what you just shared, Crystal, you're starting to answer the final question that we ask everybody, which is, how do we get 50% market share for regen brands by 2050, which is obviously there's going to be a lot of trolls we need to take down to do that. Yeah. But curious to get, y'all's take on that between all three of you.
My answer is education. There is simply no other way, in my opinion. And if we're going to talk specifically, obviously, about regenerative brands, I can tell you the one thing that I've learned that's been pretty profound to me, because we know a lot of farmers, most all organic farmers that we know and have mentored us, have not taken the leap toward regenerative certification. And quite frankly, they don't. It's not because they don't follow the practices already. It's just for them, it's like an extra certification. I mean, the people who understand food and who are growing it for the right reasons are already implementing practices that is going to make the soil more nutrient dense so that they can grow food that mimics that. But in the larger consumer audience, if we're going to talk about growth, from the years that we've been doing what we've done and from the classes that I've taught, I learned something that was really mind-blowing to me, which is the idea that the general consumer has no trust in the concept of organic at all. This was so shocking to me to find out this, because we ask this question in the whole food classes that we teach. Our classes are taught in a series where information is built upon one to the next, and food terminology is woven into all of them. And so the very first question that we start out with is, what is your view of organic? And they all say the same thing across the board, because these people are coming in to be educated about food, and it doesn't mean anything. It's like kind of like the word natural. I mean, it's just like a fluffy word to put on a label so that you can charge more money. The word organic oftentimes gets correlated with the idea of more expensive. But when you have opportunity to spend time with them and talk about all the things that we've covered today in terms of growing practices and why we do what we do, how we do it, and there's specific, it's hard, right? There are very specific reasons for farming this way.
Mm-hmm.
If there weren't, we'd be crazy for doing it because it's a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
But it's the right way to do it. And when you can explain that story in its entirety, it matters to people. The word regenerative matters because it's understandable. It speaks to a system, it speaks to a practice, and not only just a label. And so, but I think that there's a lot of people really confused by that word. You know, it's a word that everyone knows, but to be able to explain how it pertains to food is a lot actually more complicated. And so we hope as a brand that we can help further it by helping to educate and share that story at a real basic grassroots level that we can make understandable to all audiences, depending upon, you know, what their reason is for wanting to know. But one mom at a time, one family at a time, one consumer at a time, knowing enough information to care about making the right decision at the grocery store or with the products that they choose to eat.
Yeah. Amen. That's a tough act to follow, but I'll ask if Jody and Brei have anything to add to that. That was pretty damn good.
I'd say go for it, Brei, because I'm just along for the ride with these two to get us to that place.
I yes, Crystal. I mean, yes to what she said. I think what I would add is investors to put their money where their mouth is, and you want something different. Let's partner and let's make something different happen. And infrastructure. The hardest, you know, the thing is somebody has to go first, and that's in this case in their farming community. They're a representative of a very, very large farming community in Montana. And there are a lot of people who are watching what they're doing to see, is it worth my time? Is it worth the investment of this certification? So doing that first, seeing that there's infrastructure, there's support for these growers who are trying to do something different, all of those things need to happen in order for there to be kind of a ripple effect. I do believe it's coming, but again, who's going first?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring it back to the Billy Goat because now I know this story. But yeah, right now it kind of feels like the smaller brands are sneaking past the troll now to start that ripple effect. And then the bigger goats and the bigger goats will continue on until the movement gets to the point where we can knock the troll off the bridge. And hopefully everybody's understanding what regen is, why it's important for themselves, and they know how they can support it. So yeah, I don't think this Billy Goat thing is going to like follow me around for a long time. I'm going to keep seeing that story everywhere. But I think you're both right. I think consumer education has to happen. And there also has to be a fundamental shift in how we do business. And how we support these brands. Because Crystal and Jody, to your point, like it's more work. It's harder to do. And if we don't support that transition, like it's never going to happen.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's a very collaborative effort. And I think the one thing that we haven't touched on as a company that we're kind of excited about is a concept called a grit together. And there's a couple ways that we do that. But one of them is to show that together, no matter what it is that you're making or growing in the food world, in an intentional, organic or regenerative way, we can come together. And so we have a lot of fun with that because grits pair with about anything, right? We can go sweet, we can go savory, and we can take other people's ingredients and combine them with ours. And so it's a concept that we roll out with. You talked bone broth. We should talk about a grit together later.
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely going to do I'll be doing some in my kitchen pretty soon here as soon as we get to my house. So yeah, it's going to happen.
But that's how it works. And it'll be a collaborative effort for sure. But those are the best kind anyway.
And the spirit of that has been so apparent in this episode by the amount of individual people and organizations that have been named that y'all have worked with in some capacity or learned from or mentored or been mentored by. And I think Kyle and I definitely share like that's what all this regen work is like all about. And probably our favorite part is just how collaborative it all is. And I think that's how we get there. So love it. And just appreciate y'all so much for joining us and doing the work that you're doing and happy we can support in this way.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing and for helping get stories out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Pleasure to meet you three. Just a reminder for any of the listeners, the website is gruffgrains.com. I will absolutely be buying some as soon as we're done with this podcast. So yeah, thank you all again so much for the time and sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen recaps on the website. Regen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.